Okay, so we previously talked about, you know, how valuable a market is. Is it worth going into a particular market? And, I gave the example that if we had some sort of obscure British kind of board game, we want to implement it on a Nintendo, then it might not be worth going into the market because the market would be far too small. However, we thought the family size segment for consoles might be a really nice market and might be an expanding market. So being able to think about markets in terms of how large they are, how profitable they are, is actually quite a useful thing. So we're going to go, we're not an accounting class, we're not an advanced analytics class, but we just want to go through a few of the basics of sizing markets. We're going to think a little bit about, how to estimate market size. We're going to think a little bit about kind of what if scenarios. And I'm going to expand the material in the book and show you how to do some really basic what if scenarios in Excel. So let's just think, we talked about the different segmentation bases last class. But say, for example, here, we're looking maybe at fashion for upper income kind of American males. We're looking people aged 35 to 55, which is demographic. We're looking at kind of their behavior, what sort of magazines they read, like Esquire and Men's Health, their favorite shoes, whether or not they're married. Then we can look at potentially the size of this segment. We know that there's 46 million people aged 35 to 55, which is about 14% of the US population. And then we can kind of, we can target in a little bit more on that. We can kind of, for example, maybe look at income. If we actually have some preference data, we can actually maybe look at people we think are going to be likely to buy our product. So let's just do a very simple market sizing exercise. Now, this is actually out of date. The US population has grown about 10% since there. But imagine we're trying to find the US population. We want to find the proportion of people aged between 25 and 44. And in fact, this is 26.6% of the total US population. So we multiply 309 million times 26.6, and we have a potential market size of about 82 million people. Now, we decided we're aiming for business professionals, and only 18% of this age group actually fall into this. So we kind of multiply our 82 million by 18%, and we're left with about 15 million. And in fact, we could do this calculation for smaller areas. If we're looking for a certain metro, so say we look at the number of people in Las Vegas, we could look and say, hey, we'll do this calculation for a certain subset of the US population. So here we've got 580,000 people in Vegas. Multiply it by, we've got to make some very broad assumptions here. We're not aiming for complete accuracy, but we'll assume that the proportion of people in this age range is the same as the US. So we multiply by 26.6 and then by the number of professionals, which is 18%. We can also think a little bit about, how our markets can grow over time. We could look, for example, we could look at population data, we could look at sales data, and we could kind of extrapolate this forward. It's something called a moving average. Now, I don't want to really get into the technicalities of forecasting in this class. We'll do a few examples in the practical and Excel, but this is probably a whole other class. But just a simple concept is a moving average. If we have 3 years of data, so say, for example, we had 2020, 2021, and 2022, then our moving average for those 3 years would be the average of those kind of 2020, 2021, 2022. Then we move to 2023, and then the 3-year moving average will be 2021, 2022, and 2023. So what this does is effectively damps any kind of extreme patterns. So this is like monthly data, and we've got monthly manufacturing data, and this will depend a lot on things like, electricity prices, seasonality. And you can see the gray is the data. And then we do a 12-month moving average. So we literally plot here the average of 12 months. And then we can see, and you can see here how we've plotted it. So we actually have 6 months to the left and 6 months to the right. We plot the moving average in the middle here. So say, for example, if we did 2021, 2022, and 2023, we plot the moving average at the 2022 point. But here we're doing 12 months. And you can see that this red curve is much smoother than the gray curve. By taking 12 months of data, we've got rid of these kind of bumps in the road. And quite often that is actually better for forecasting future values. Another potential do is we could kind of do what you did in business stats, is we could actually fit regression to the data, in that we see there's a trend, and then we just assume that this trend is going to kind of continue. Now, simple regression doesn't work well in all scenarios. So this is the actual versus predicted, and this is a bit out of date, but we have airline passengers over time, and you can see there's a strong seasonal effect here, in that there's obviously a lot more people traveling in the summertime. But what we could do is we could actually add seasonality into the regression, again, a little bit beyond this class. But the idea is we're trying to take the past, the past patterns in the data and use it to predict future patterns in the data. So we'll do a little bit in Excel, in the practicals, but we won't do, I'm not going to assume too much advanced stats, because this isn't stats 2, this is a marketing class. And the last little kind of concept, and I'm going to demonstrate this in Excel, is that of sensitivity analysis. And the fact is, these numbers we're doing are pretty vague rules of thumb. We just want to get some idea about our market size. If we think that 10% of people are going to buy our product, it could be 5%, it could be 15%. We hope we have past knowledge of the market. If we're Nintendo, we've seen how other consoles have done and how many people have bought the console. So we've got a pretty good idea, but we can't get exact numbers. So we may want to see, if the numbers are a little bit lower than we thought or a little bit higher than we thought, how do we actually deal with that? Which goes back to my example here. So I downloaded this data from the US Census website, and this is US population data. And what I did was I have the population, total population, split by age group, male population, and female population. So let's just say Nintendo's looking at this segment of basically older child and teen male gamers. So for a start off, we've got the male population of the US is 165 million. Now, and all I did was I looked back to my data cell and picked D4. So it's this cell here. Now then, the proportion that's in the teens, and I did kind of, I did a very broad definition here. I basically did anybody in the 10 to 14 and the 15 to 19. So this is basically, these are the sort of people who are going to be playing online games with their friends. Age 10 to 19. We want to kind of get an idea of this segment. So for males, we know that 6.6 is in 10 to 14 and 6.9 is in 15 to 19. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically go data E8 and E9, which is this one and this one added together, which adds 13%. And then we're going to multiply our original male population by the 13%, which gets us our revised male teen population of 22.3 million. Now, let's assume that we think, based on our previous analyses of the previous generation of consoles, 10% of this population are going to buy, let's just say, a yearly subscription to our online gaming service. This would give us a customer base of approximately 2.27 million. And imagine that we actually sell revenue for each of these subscriptions for $90 a year. And then we also have the number of years, which shouldn't be in dollars. Let me just reformat that. Let's just stick number. So what we do is we have 2 million customers. We have yearly revenue of $90. We do this for 1 year, and then we multiply the total together. Number of customers, yearly revenue, and number of years. We could say do this for 5 years, and we get a lot more revenue, obviously. And we could mess around with the amount of revenue. Say we think we're going to have to discount our subscriptions. We might only be able to sell for $80, or we might be able to sell more for $100. Or we might get our market penetration a little bit wrong. We think it's $10. We think we're going to get 10% of the market, but imagine we only get 5% of the market. Then we make $100 million revenue instead of $200 million revenue. So Excel actually has some tools called what if analyses. So if we go to what if analyses, and the first thing is the scenario manager. Okay, and so for the scenario manager, what we can do is we could look at different values of revenue and look at different values of market penetration. Let's just stay kind of simple. Let's just stay with market penetration. Let's assume that we've decided we're going to charge $90 for the next so many years. We could get even more complicated by adding inflation to the revenue, but we're not going to go there. So let's just say we're going to call this scenario, and we're going to say market 10%. And here we're going to say, with my market 10%, B5, which is my market penetration, is going to be basically 10%. So I see it's 0.1 here. 10% in Excel is actually coded as 0.1. It's out of 100%. So that's going to be 0.1. And we're going to say market 5%. And it's going to be 0.05. Market 15%. And it's going to be 0.15. So what we can do now is, if we click 10%, nothing's actually going to change. But if we click 5% and click show, we will actually get, if we only got 5% market penetration, we got 15%, we can show the revenue there. So obviously, you would have lots of different scenarios involving multiple variables. This is actually quite kind of simple, but the idea is you can set up different business scenarios, put in the variables, and see what the profit is going to be. The second thing we can do is going to be what we call the goal seek. And here, what we say we want to know, we've been told by our, shareholders, our boss, that we need to get a total revenue of 250 million. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And we get this by changing our market penetration. So what penetration do we need to get revenue of 250 million? I'm going to click OK. And this is going to be 12%. So we'd need a market penetration of 12% to get that 250 million. Okay, so let's just change this back to 10%. Oh, let's just say, okay. And so you can actually set goals for your, in this case, revenue, in this case, your dependent variable. So let's just kind of summarize what we've done here. We've talked a little bit about market sizing. We've showed how we can start off with like the population of the US. We can drill down, very, very vague. This isn't going to be kind of accurate. Look at the kind of, what the potential size of our market is. We did a little bit very basic about, how to forecast values and how to forecast future values. And then we did a little bit of sensitivity analysis. The book material is kind of quite dry, so I try to give you an example on Excel. It really is just a case of, what if things change? What if our costs change? What if our profit changes? What if we get our number of customers potentially wrong, and plugging those in for different business scenarios. And then we basically have an overall market size, market size estimate. We did it by, drilling down and then assuming that we have 10%. But we could almost build this up with the marketing funnel. We can say, what proportion of people are aware of these, how many test our product, and of these, how many repeat purchase. Okay, so the last little things is when we're considering market segments. There are a few things that obviously affect whether a segment is worth going for. Is how profitable is a particular segment. If you think about airlines now have a lot of focus on loyalty, and kind of building additional revenue from existing customers, you know, giving incentives for spending more money, giving people status. It's all about maximizing profitability for current segments. We also need to think about competition. You know, I talked about the gym market and the coffee market. You know, there's big potential out there, but these are very, you know, we've got everybody in the coffee shop market from Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts to, you know, little mom and pop stores. So it's a very fiercely competitive market. Just here's a bit of interesting information. So this actually has the most profitable companies in the world I've found. And the most profitable is Saudi Aramco. So that's the oil company in Saudi Arabia. Then we have the three major tech stocks, Apple, Microsoft, and Alphabet, Google, USPS, ExxonMobil. So a lot of these, you know, there's either something with a monopoly, like the USPS, we've got oil, or we have like tech. And again, that's kind of, you know, it's kind of almost, yeah, we know tech companies are going to be profitable, but there's also quite a high barrier to entry for tech services. We make money, you know, selling operating systems, selling cell phones, but you know, we're not going to be able to. Every company can't just come and buy a cell phone. It needs a huge amount of expertise, knowledge, and infrastructure. And again, just this was from the same article I found. This was just saying of the world's largest companies, what are the overall profits? And again, energy, financial sector, technology, healthcare, and transportation are the sectors with the leading profits. And it's quite interesting. I thought this was the net gross and net profit margin for different industries. So you can see, for example, that advertising has 25% gross profit, but once we have all the kind of things like human costs in there, it only has a gross profit margin of 3%. We can see, for example, hotel and gaming seems very profitable, but once we get down to the net profit, we're kind of, majority of hotels actually lose money. And software, if you've got a good niche in software industry, then you have both high gross profit and high net profit. So just some kind of interesting figures there on different industries. The final little thing is just we've done some business to consumer market sizing. We looked at the size of, you know, potential size of the market in consumers. We can also look at this in industries. We can look at different businesses. Say, for example, I sell network services to businesses. I could get a list of businesses from the census and then work out what my potential market size is, the number of large businesses that might potentially need my service. I did prepare a little example for you with the census, but apparently the census is down at the moment. I don't know. Maybe Elon's been messing around with the census data. I'm not quite sure. But if this is working again next week, then I will show you that example. Okay, so that's all there is from chapter 4. So I'm a little behind with the videos, but I will post intro chapter 5 video in the next hour or so.